Hello, I'm Jason Perry. I'm a record producer and TV host of a show called Songcake, but also I'm a singer in a band called A. You may remember us from songs such as Nothing and The Old Folks Are Losers and Don't Want Your Job in Starbucks. Actually, they all sound the same. But the good news is, after 25 years of mucking around and making other people's records for them, we've just finished our own. So we have a new album coming out this spring, and I'm so proud of it. So I'm going to talk to you about the new album, and I'm also going to talk about A and reflect on some of our past triumphs and tragedies, kind of spill the beans on what it was like being in A. So here we go. I was born in Leeds with my two brothers, Adam and Giles. And the first gig I ever saw was The Jam, which was life-changing. I can't remember much about it, apart from I was terrified. But I remember going to school the next day and thinking, all I want to do is be in a band. And that is all I wanted to do. When we were 13, we moved to Suffolk, to a quiet little village called Southwold, which is trendy now, who wasn't then. And the first person we met there was a guy called Mark, who came up to us at school and said something not very nice to me and Adam. And then he also said, have you ever heard anybody play the lead guitar solo to Hammer to Fall by Queen? And I said, no, I've never even heard Hammer to Fall by Queen. I like The Jam and Big Country and U2 and bands like that. And he went, what? Because in Suffolk, you're only allowed to like two bands at once, and they have to be village metal, as we called it. So Mark liked Van Halen and Iron Maiden. He soon got us into Van Halen and Iron Maiden, and other friends soon got us into Rush and AC/DC and bands like that. And we were kind of the weird ones because we liked the Police and we liked The Jam, and I liked Sade, U2. In fact, I loved U2. They had an album called, what's it called? Under Blood Red Sky, like an EP, a live EP from Red Rocks. And I was obsessed with A, going to Red Rocks and B, being in a live band. I wanted to be Bono so much. Anyway, we went around Mark's house and he played us the guitar solo to Hammer to Fall with his Ibanez guitar and a little Roland Cube amp. And then he started playing Eruption by Van Halen. And I remember I'm 14, I've never heard anybody play lead guitar. So I especially started doing this stuff. I was like, this is ace. So yeah, we used to sit together in school every day and we'd draw logos on our books and desks of bands that we loved. And meanwhile, everybody else was getting girlfriends and I was trying to learn an instrument and I couldn't learn one. I still haven't learned one. And my brother decided one day to play drums, Adam, and I decided to sing. And that was it. I just woke up one day and went, I'm going to be a singer tomorrow. And next day I was a singer. And I'm still trying to work out what that is and how you do it. But it was a fun time. We kind of had the gift of the gab and we persuaded our school to let us have the keys to the school, and they would let us come in at night and rehearse and set up in the school hall. And that's what we did. We formed a band called Grand Designs, and we had another guy in the band called David James, who was a keyboard player and guitarist. And then we decided to get Mark. Mark was in a band called Valhalla, and then they changed the name to LA and became more kind of synth rock and started playing Jump by Van Halen. I couldn't believe it. It's so cool. There was loads of other bands. Like growing up in Lowestoft was the best. There's like a battle of the bands every month. But we moved to London to try and get a record deal. And Dan Hawkins, who's in the darkness, lived with us in our house, and Stevie Swindon. And we formed what is now called A. And we tried 2-3 years to get a record deal. Like back then, you had to have a record deal. I can't really articulate. That was all it was. Like to some people, it was like, you know, have you had sex yet? To us, it's like, have you got a record deal? That's all that mattered. I had no money. We used to take it in turns to use each other's travel cards to go into London and go around all the venues like the Marquee and stuff with our demo tapes and try and get gigs. And we were quite successful, but we could never get a deal. We had almost hundreds of letters from rejection letters from record labels. We were kind of honing our craft and getting good at songwriting, but we didn't have any attitude. We didn't have anything about us that made you think, they'll be your favourite band. And I was watching TV one day and there's a documentary with John Entwistle from The Who. He's dead now. Don't know why I said that. Don't look for him, I guess, because he's dead. I think he died having sex in Vegas, mid-orgasm. Maybe he didn't. Maybe I just heard that. But anyway, he said, if you're trying to get a record deal, you don't deserve one. And I was like, you absolute prick. Like, you're a multi-millionaire, you're in The Who. I'm trying my hardest to get a record deal. and no one cares. And I put my life on hold. I don't have a relationship. I don't have any money. I don't have a job. All my mates have gone off backpacking around the world to Thailand and stuff. I stayed at home to try and get a record deal, and you're telling me that I don't deserve one. And then I woke up the next morning and I had one of these kind of like eureka moments that you tend to do when you wake up. And I was like, God, he's right. I didn't. Paul Weller tried to get a record deal. Did Joe Strummer or the Police, or like, can you imagine Van Halen trying to get a record deal? Like, of course it didn't. They just were so amazing that people tried to sign them. And I remember I called Mark and said, you got to come down. And Mark came down from Suffolk. We decided to start again, and we ripped everything up. And we were friends with EMF, who had You're Unbelievable as a big song, and friends with Jesus Jones, who had Right Here, Right Now. And for some reason, all those bands would end up round our house and we'd have this amazing time. And it'd be people like Mary from Gay Bikers and Acid, and like Jesus Jones and EMF, and it'd be us and Dan Hawkins. And like, we just had this great time. Like, people like being with us. We've got this kind of infectious thing going on. I don't know what it is. We need to get that into our music. So we scrapped everything and I re-recorded 3 demos in an afternoon, put Mark's amp in the bath in our little house. And we were so poor, his long-suffering wife sat next door watching TV. Well, we just noodled around, made loads of noise. God knows what the neighbour thought, poor woman. We had these 3 songs. In the meantime, we'd gone to New York, and it sounds exciting, but it was 150 quid on Q80 Airlines. In fact, this shows how old it was. I ran up and down the aisle of this Q80 airline flight to New York with a balaclava on, pretending to be a terrorist. I thought it'd make Mark laugh, and we had a video camera, and I thought it'd be funny. A few years later, I would have been shot. But anyway, I got away with it. Went to New York, and we played at CBGB's, and we played at the Key Club, the Mercury Lounge, a bunch of gigs that this guy in New York managed to get us. And he was a guy called Andrew Adams, who's a great bloke, and he loved our band. And he worked at EMI Publishing. So we went to see him in the office one day. While we were there, he nipped out for a meeting. I looked in his drawer and stole loads of old cassette cases and letterheads, and didn't tell him. And we went back home, and I forged all these letters from EMI saying that we just signed this band A, and we put all our demos, our titles of our demo on these cassette cases, and we sent them all out. So people thought we were signed by EMI Publishing, which we weren't. But things like that make a big difference. And it's that kind of fake it till you make it thing. You've got to try and be entrepreneurial when you're in a band. You've got to try all these things to get a deal. So we did, and we had our own little studio that we managed to get a Prince's Trust grant for. We put these demos out, and we needed a gig, and there was a bit of interest then. Suddenly people were interested. And then we'd gone and knocked on the door of a guy called Jeff Meal at the agency, because he was Rush's agent, or the agent, Neil, his boss, was Rush's agent. And we'd read that in the sleeve notes of Rush, the agency. I didn't even know what an agent was, but we knocked on his door and made loads of noise and had a good time. And he probably can't remember now. But we got a call one day from him saying, I've put you on this bill at the Water Rats in King's Cross because there's a band called Bush and there's a band called Moist. And I thought it'd be funny if the poster said A Moist Bush. And we said, we think that's funny too. We'll come and play. So now we had a gig, first on with this band called Moist and then a band called Bush. I remember speaking to Gavin, and he was really disheartened, and he said, we're off to go try our luck in America. Worked out pretty well. I reminded him of that a few years later when we were playing festivals with them. And we played, and we were great. There was about 20 record labels there, however many there was. And we had this demo tape, and we went from having no interest to having like 8 or 9 record deals offered within a week, just by stopping trying, just by being our own personalities and our own selves and making music we wanted to make, and not pandering to anybody, and making it exciting. And basically it felt like, do you want to be in our gang? Because our gang's ace. And that's it. That's all our little manifesto was. Got on the tube, went to London Records, walked in, and he had a Jane's Addiction poster, Out Come the Wolves by Rancid, nearly said The Clash, by Rancid, and the Beastie Boys, Grand Royal Slipmat, and Pete Tong was there, who was the head of A&R, who was a DJ. And we were talking to Pete about Grand Royal because he knew Mike D. And it just felt like, wow, we're all in the same boat here. We all love the same things. And Paul said, look, we're gonna offer you a record deal. And I said, Ace. And he saw us as like the punk rock Supergrass, which I thought was great. And he said, what do you want? And we said, well, we've got offers from loads of labels. He said, well, do you want us to give you the credit card and you can go on a spending spree and stuff? Well, no. What we want is tour support. We want to play 200 shows a year for the first 3 years, and we want tour support. We want 100 grand in tour support so we can do it, and we want you to buy us a van. So they agreed. They gave us 100 grand tour support, bought us a van, and we signed a deal. And within the first 2 years, we've done 256 shows a year. Our agent, Steve Strange, God rest his soul, he's not with us anymore, booked us from Plymouth to Newcastle to Exeter to Liverpool to London to Glasgow to Leeds to Devon, like literally routed it the worst he could. And we play in front of 1-2 people a night until there was 10 people, until there was a front row. And the first time we had a front row, which was our dream. My dream was flight cases, barriers, and a front row. I wanted to feel like I was in a real band, you know. And we played in Portsmouth, Wedgwood Rooms, and I think there was 200 people there. And this is before any radio. We never got on radio. And there was a front row. And I started jumping around and they knew the songs. And we were like, wait a minute, this is amazing. And it was one of the best feelings I'd ever had in my life. And we went and made an album in California. I'd never been to California before. And we ended up living there for 6 months. We made our album with Tom Wilson, who just produced The Offspring. And we came back and we released 5 in the Morning, Cheeky Monkey, and then nothing happened. The label hated us. We couldn't get on the radio. And then we released a song called Fog On, and it got B-listed at Radio 1. And from that moment on, people in the label started to believe in us. Yeah, we started to play some pretty good shows, and we started to get pretty good. And I'll leave the rest of the story for another day. That was part 1. I reckon there's going to be 4 parts of this. And then part 5 will be talking about the new album. All right, bye.